Right now it's 78 degrees at the beach, 80 degrees downtown. It looks like it's going to be a great sunny day. Perfect weather for getting outside. The Jay and Richard Show is up next.
Good morning and welcome to the Jay and Richard Show. Believe it or not, today's topic is traffic safety. My guest today is Greg Saris, nationally recognized expert on traffic safety, especially as it relates to bicycle safety. We want to hear your calls, questions, and concerns about bicycling. Greg, I frankly don't know how you talked my producer into doing this show. It seems like a real sleeper.
Well, good morning, Jan, and thanks for having me. I know this isn't the hottest topic, but I can pretty much guarantee that every one of your listeners has a story about bicycling.
Well, I think you must be right because we have 4 lines lit up. Let's take the first call from Veronica from Fort Lauderdale. Veronica, you're on the Jan Richard Show.
Thanks, Jan. I got to tell you that just this morning on my way to work, I was in a crash with a guy on a bike. I was coming to a stop sign to make a right turn, and I came to a stop, and I looked in both directions. I checked the sidewalk both ways, so I started to go, and I heard a loud thud, and I thought I ran over something. But when I got out of my car, I saw a bicyclist on the ground. I thought he was dead. I didn't even see him. I called 911.
That's terrible. What happened to the cyclist, do you know?
I don't know. He was alive, but still unconscious when the ambulance took him away.
How are you doing?
I'm a bit shaken. I keep hearing the thud and seeing him on the ground. I was so shaken I couldn't even drive. A friend had to take me to work.
Veronica, which direction was the cyclist headed in?
I'm not really sure, but from the way he and his bike were after the crash, it looked as if he was, riding against traffic.
Did he have a light on his bike, or was he wearing a helmet? And did you notice if he was wearing light or dark clothing?
I'm not sure. Wait a minute. He didn't have a light. I never saw a helmet. And I'm pretty sure he was wearing dark clothes.
I doubt it's much consolation, but it doesn't sound like you did anything wrong. On the other hand, the bicyclist did do a few things that contributed to the crash. The cyclist was riding in the dark without lights and wearing dark clothing. Cyclists think just because they see the car, the motorist can see them. They don't realize that this is just not the case. A headlight would have helped, but both a headlight and a taillight are required by law, and reflective clothing would have increased the cyclist's visibility from all angles, not just the front. Just having reflectors is not enough. The biggest mistake he made was riding in the street against traffic. Besides being against the law, most motorists don't look to their right for traffic. Unfortunately, many bicyclists think the biggest danger is getting hit from behind, but they really have a greater chance of getting hit by a motorist crossing their path. In only about 7% of bicycle motor vehicle crashes does the bicyclist get hit from behind. Riding against traffic accounts for about 30% of the crashes. Also, when a bicyclist is riding against traffic, it makes it difficult for either a motorist or another bicyclist to pass them. To make matters worse, when the 2 bicyclists are competing for the same space, one of them is going to have to do something unsafe.
Well, Veronica, thanks for the call. Veronica? Still there?
I'm sorry. I just found out the cyclist is still alive, but still unconscious. The doctors are pretty sure he has some brain damage. I feel so bad. I really didn't see him. Bye.
Jan, I wish people would understand how important it is to wear a bike helmet. Even a simple fall can cause serious brain damage. I hope the rest of the calls aren't this traumatic.
Me too. Okay, our next caller is Elroy from Miami.
Hey, Jan, how you doing?
Great. What's your story, Elroy?
No story, but I have a question for Greg. I commute to work by bicycle, and yes, I ride in the road, and yes, I obey the traffic laws. What I don't understand is why motorists feel compelled to take a right turn in front of bicyclists. The worst part of it is, more often than not, they aren't even aware they did it.
I know exactly what you mean. Most people don't realize that most bicyclists are traveling 12 to 15 miles per hour. When they pass you and slow down to turn, they don't think about you catching up to them. What they should do is turn behind you. Motorists need to understand that the travel time is no more than a few seconds different if they pass you and cut you off, or if they follow behind you and wait to turn. The big difference is that waiting is much safer.
One of my pet peeves is people who don't use their blinker.
Mine too.
Okay, we've got another call on the line. Mary.
Hey, Jan. I just moved here from Ohio and wanted to start riding my bicycle again, but I was told that it's illegal to ride my bike on the sidewalk. Is this true? To be quite honest, I'm scared to ride on the busy streets.
Mary, you probably don't realize it, but you just opened a can of worms. For starters, it is not illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk, unless there's a sign that prohibits it. If you do ride on the sidewalk, you have the same rights and responsibilities as a pedestrian. However, the pedestrian has the right of way, and you're obligated to give an audible signal when passing from behind. Just be careful about what direction the pedestrian is going to move in before you pass. Now, as far as the safety of riding on the sidewalk versus riding in the street, it is much more difficult to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk. You have to deal with benches, poles, signs, and pedestrians. Believe it or not, you are more likely to get into a crash with a car when you ride on the sidewalk than when you ride in the street.
Wait. Say that again, the part about crashes?
You're more likely to get into a crash with a car when you ride on the sidewalk than when you ride in the street.
Okay.
In over 30% of bicycle motor vehicle crashes, the bicyclist was riding on the sidewalk. Before I get into the reasons, let me ask you this. Where do you think most crashes happen? Think back to your driver's ed course.
I never took driver's ed, Greg.
Intersections?
Right, intersections. Every intersection creates a conflict point. Every time a bicyclist on the sidewalk crosses a driveway or street, they go through an intersection or conflict point. By law, motorists are supposed to make every effort to avoid hitting a pedestrian or bicyclist. They usually roll across the cyclist's path, looking for cars coming from their left. If you're riding on the sidewalk, especially against the flow of traffic, there's a good chance that the motorist won't even look in your direction. Again, while the driver is supposed to look in both directions before crossing the sidewalk, I wouldn't count on it. Drivers tend to focus on moving into traffic and search where traffic usually comes from. If you're on the sidewalk or coming from the opposite direction, you're not where traffic is supposed to come from. Even if we could get every driver entering the street to stop and look in both directions before crossing the sidewalk, you would still have the problems associated with right and left turning motorists. Motorists need to check sidewalks as well as the streets before making a turn. Even though it seems scarier to ride in the street, it is actually a better place to ride.
Okay, Mary, I'm getting a signal that it's time for a commercial break. But before we break, my advice to you is that you find a local cycling club that you can join. You know, there's safety in numbers, and by riding with them, you can help build your confidence and your abilities.
And remember, Mary, not all clubs are created equal. Some are for speed and some are for recreation.
Thanks. We'll take a break now, and we'll be right back. Well, you weren't kidding when you said a can of worms.
And that's only if you're riding against traffic on the sidewalk. If you're riding on the road, that creates a few other problems.
Such as?
From a motorist's perspective, cyclists come out of nowhere and give you no options when it comes to passing them. If the cyclist is riding with traffic, the motorist can choose the safest time to pass.
So how much room should you give a cyclist when you're passing?
Well, as much as possible, but at least 3 feet. You never know what is going to affect steering the bicycle. Surface conditions are more of a problem for bicyclists than for motorists. Cyclists have to contend with rocks, glass, and globs of concrete, stuff you wouldn't even see or feel in a car. Even the wind can be a major factor. I was once blown across a lane of traffic by a crosswind.
We're back. Welcome back to the Jan Richards Show. I'm here with Greg Saris, bicycle safety expert, and we're talking about bicycle safety. And we have another caller on the line, Helen.
My question is a two-parter. First, I've noticed that there are more bike lanes being put in. As a motorist, I'm not real sure how to deal with them when I'm making a right turn. And second, as a cyclist, I was wondering if I have to ride in them all the time.
Good questions. I was hoping someone would ask. First, from the motorist perspective, treat the bike lane like any other travel lane. The big difference is that it's only wide enough for a bike. When making a right turn across a bike lane, you search, signal, and yield like you would if it was a full-size travel lane. Then you block the bike lane so a bicyclist can't pass you on the right. If you pass a bicyclist within 150 feet of your turn, chances are they will catch up to you. Let them pass before you move over. If a turn lane is present, merge across the bike lane into the turn lane and stay behind the bicyclist. As for the second part of your question, you do not have to remain in the bike lane. You have the right to use the entire road. As a matter of fact, if you operate your bicycle in vehicular style, you will fare better in traffic than those that don't.
Okay, now explain what you mean by vehicular style.
Operate your bicycle like you are driving a car. According to Florida law, a bicycle is a vehicle, and if the bicyclist is riding in the street, they have the same rights and responsibility as motorists. As slow-moving vehicles, bicycles have to stay as far to the right as practicable, but can leave this area if they need to avoid debris, parked cars, make a left turn, or are moving as fast or faster than other traffic. A word of caution: riding with traffic takes some getting used to and practice. You need to be careful to choose roads that are not above your skill level. Only a proficient cyclist should attempt to make a vehicular style left turn on heavily traveled roads. Fortunately, a bicyclist has the option of making a pedestrian style left turn. I've had to use them when traffic was so heavy I couldn't move over.
A pedestrian style left turn?
What does practicable mean?
Okay, first the pedestrian style turn. Instead of trying to move across 2 or 3 lanes of traffic to make a left, the cyclist simply rides or walks through the intersection, stops on the other side, turns his bicycle, and crosses when the light turns green.
Okay, now Greg, what about the second part of Helen's question, the part about staying as far to the right as practicable?
Okay, while it is possible to ride your bike in the gutter, it is not practical because of the amount of debris that collects there. Even more importantly, you're likely to hit your pedal on the curb. It is more practical to ride 12 to 18 inches from the edge of the pavement. This not only eliminates the problems of gutter riding, but also reduces the chance that a motorist will try an unsafe pass instead of moving over to give you the room you need.
Well, Helen, I hope we've answered some of your questions.
You did, thanks.
You know, Greg, I didn't think this was going to be such a great show, but it turned out to be pretty interesting. Could you sum up in about 60 seconds the most important points that our listeners should remember?
Sure, Jan, no problem. First of all, when riding in a roadway, cyclists should obey the law and ride with traffic, not against it. Second, it's safer to ride on the roadway. However, if you choose to ride on the sidewalk, use caution and courtesy. Third, wear a helmet, and when riding at night, use lighting and wear reflective clothing. Fourth, motorists, please be aware of cyclists. Be patient and take care to pass and turn safely. Use your blinkers. Fifth, treat bicycle lanes like any other travel lane, and before you make a move, be aware of cyclists using them and yield to them if necessary. And last but not least, Florida law considers a bicycle a vehicle, and the bicyclist has the same rights and responsibilities as a motorist. You know, Jan, if just 1 out of 5 of your listeners rode their bicycle instead of driving their cars, that would be 20% fewer cars contributing to traffic congestion as well as water, air, and noise pollution.
Good point. Greg Sarris, thank you so much for joining me. You've been listening to Greg Sarris, nationally recognized traffic safety expert. We've been talking about bicycle safety. I hope you've learned something today, and I hope you'll tune in tomorrow when we're bringing in French chef Albert. Thanks for joining us.